Bad blood. You're sitting in the hospital corridor, waiting for word that you can go in. You still don't know if you want to go in. It's been 8 years. Estrangement. You've become strangers. You shift uneasily. You would rather be anywhere else. Your husband and daughter said that you might regret it afterwards if you didn't at least visit her. In the pit of your stomach, in the bottom of your heart, somewhere inside in the deep core of you, glows a tiny flickering light. It's hope. They say that hope's a spring trickling forth forevermore. It's the thing that makes us human. The light is brittle, cloaking the room in a chalky pallor. Helen is sitting up, but the illness has left a heavy toll. She has become skeletal, hardly making a dent in the pillows behind her. Her sparse grey hair is coiled in steel wool springs, her thin face unfamiliar. Only the voice hasn't changed. Louise, she says with a little smile. How are you doing, you ask neutrally. You do not even try to hug her, and do not apologize for not trying. You can get away without touching nowadays, after the pandemic. Every cloud has a silver. You watch as she recounts bits and pieces about the litres of salty solution she has to swallow each day, the continuous tests. Could chemo do this, you wonder? Enter your cells and transform you, removing any trace of the child, the teenager, the woman. So how are you? Helen asks then. I'm grand. Oh, it is a disappointed oh that at last brings the old Helen back to life, resuscitating the ghost of what she was. Disappointed, you imagine, because you are well, because you are not also wasting away because of a terminal illness. Coincidentally, you and Helen had often experienced things at the same time, despite the 4 years difference in age. Getting the jobs you wanted, meeting your future husbands, buying a home, all the big stages in life you had traversed together. Luckily, for otherwise announcing these things to her at a time when you used to phone each other weekly would have involved a certain amount of trepidation for you. Or you might not have told her at all until she had equally good news to impart. You don't think that other people's families work that way. Helen talks about the nurses, how solicitous they are, and the specialist, the best surgeon in town. Go on, you intone silently. Say it, say it. Say you're sorry. How is everyone? She asks. Everyone is your husband and your 2 daughters. She stopped long ago mentioning them by name. She blames your husband for the estrangement, as she has never believed that you have a mind of your own separate from hers. And she was unable to match you, child for child. So even speaking your daughters' names is a step too far for her. Although she can mention the names of her children's friend, cousin's daughter, but she does now, telling you details of their marriages, where they're living, how they've come to see her in hospital. After you've given a vague, circumferential account of your family, there is silence. You're expecting tears, the tears she has always been able to use to drown out any sense of blame, but none come. You moved abroad after university, partly because of work, but also, you know deep down, because you wanted to get away, to go somewhere she wouldn't follow, to live a life not under scrutiny by her, not ring-fenced by her. You often wonder at psychologists blaming mothers for the mental problems of children. You think that siblings can do even more damage. Your mother died of cancer when you were only 20. You had learned later how long it takes a tumour to grow, usually, and had calculated that it had started during your early teens, when Helen was in her tumultuous, volatile adolescent stage. 1 minute the best of crack, telling stories and joking. Then one chance remark from you or your father, one sideways glance of disapproval, and she flew into a rage. She could not countenance any objection to what she did or said. She had met a much older man at a dance, and after a big row with your mother, had gone off with him for a couple of weeks. Your mother had been in bits, unable to eat or sleep, and then she'd come back bruised and chastened. You think now that she had a disorder, bipolar or something, but it was never dealt with. It just carried on, simmering and boiling over throughout her life. Go on. The words circle in your brain like a vinyl record with a hole. Say it. Helen is talking now about someone she knows, a journalist, quite famous, who called her to see how she was. She has always been a name dropper. It's a small city here. Everyone knows everyone. And having lived abroad for so long, you know nobody, but you recognize the name. You have come to visit early in the day when, as you hoped, nobody else would be there. It's a private room, so Helen can have visitors whenever she wants. You had wanted to be alone with her so that something would emerge, make this reluctant trip worthwhile. Reconciliation is too strong a word, and not what you want anyway. It's too late for that. Too many years have gone by. Too many hurts swallowed and brushed away when you should have spoken out, got angry with her. You never did, and you wonder at that now. Fear of saying something that could cause a rift, when saying nothing had turned into a canyon-wide divide. A failing of yours, running from trouble instead of facing it head on, and you're still doing it now. On the bedside table, there is a half-eaten bowl of cornflakes. Helen notices you looking at it. I asked the nurse to leave it. I can't eat a lot at a time. I might finish it later. You're surprised that she's able to eat at all at this stage. Her determination to go on is palpable. She will not give up. She will not give in. When you became pregnant with your first child, you rang your father to tell him that he would become a grandfather for the first time. Then you rang Helen. As soon as you said the word expecting, she burst into tears. You had not been expecting effusive congratulations. Still, I've been trying to get pregnant too, she said. You were so surprised that you almost dropped the phone. She had never shown the slightest interest in becoming a mother. Just after the birth of your daughter, when you were back home from the hospital, the postman rang the doorbell and handed you a package. You'd torn off the brown paper and then stopped when you saw the cornflakes packet. You almost threw it in the bin. Why would Helen send you cornflakes? You turned the box around and saw that it had been sellotaped. A way of saving money on packaging, or an unsubtle message of derision? You checked on your baby, lying sated in her ruffled basket, with a drunk expression on her little face. Far away from trouble, safe here. After all, inside the cornflakes box was a little pink outfit. So much for Helen's angry feminist years. She had not come to visit you and the baby. This only struck you afterwards, when friends pointed out how odd it was. You were busy with the baby, busy with work, and glad you didn't have to look after Helen as well, with her habit of limelighting. Helen leans back against the pillow and closes her eyes. You think she may be falling asleep, and that you will leave if that's the case. No satisfaction. Lives never end the way they do in the movies. You're pretty sure that if you bring up what happened, she will deny everything, or turn it around so that you end up being the one at fault. You cannot do it anyway, now. It would be cruel to rake up old wrongs at this stage, upsetting her in this condition. There you go again. A ray of sunshine penetrates timidly through the window, splintering into a myriad sparkling raindrops clinging to the pain. The pain of it all. That day in Stephen's Green, when you stood with your daughter's little coat in your hand, watching them dance gaily away from you. When you were pregnant with your second child, you had gone, the three of you, to the green for a walk. Just as you were in the middle of a sentence to her, Helen clutched the hand of your 3-year-old and drew her ahead to the pond to see the swans. It crossed your mind then that Helen would love to take your daughter, keep her as her own, but you brushed aside this thought with the disdain it deserved. Then, with a sly, backward glance, Helen had pulled the child away from the pond and onwards, both of them running. You had quickened your pace, but it was late afternoon and you were already tired, so you couldn't keep up. They disappeared into a crowd of people entering the park. You stood there dissecting the crowd, but they were gone. You pushed your way through and stood at the top of Grafton Street. A slight drizzle descended and you had your daughter's coat. It was going to rain and she had no coat. You felt an ache deep inside you, kind of déjà vu, as though something you dreamt was coming true before your eyes. There was an ice cream stand not far away. That would be the kind of thing Helen would do. Buy a huge ice cream topped with whipped cream and chocolate for a toddler who would eat until sick. No sense. But they weren't there, and they weren't on the bench nearby eating cones, where a couple and a small boy were sharing a tub of ice cream. She's my sister, you kept thinking. She wouldn't harm my daughter. You turned back into the park, thinking that they would turn up where they'd left you. You walked until you had to sink onto a bench. Then they were closing the gates and you had to leave. You phoned her. It went straight to voicemail. You phoned again. You texted 8 times. You rang Helen's partner. They hadn't arrived back home. A dull pain throbbed in your groin, like a period pain. You had to calm down, not harm the baby. In the end, you went back to Helen's place. They would be there, watching TV, and Helen would say, "Where did you get to?" As though it was your fault. But they weren't there. "If they're not back by 8, I'm going to ring the guards," you told Helen's partner. But you both knew that you wouldn't do that. At nearly 9:30, Helen arrived back with a sleeping child clasped in her arms. Your daughter was wearing a yellow plastic anorak. Helen grimaced at you, managing to look both concerned and crafty. Had to buy that for her in pennies. It was raining and you had her coat. "Where the hell did you go?" It wasn't a scream, not even a shout, but Helen went shh and carried your daughter to the room you were sharing with her. You marched after her, and when she laid the child on the bed and began to remove the silly anorak, you grabbed her arm and yanked her back. "Get away from her," you hissed. "Don't ever touch her again." Helen backed out of the room, an uncertain expression on her face that turned into a smirk. She had achieved what she wanted. She got a rise out of you. She got you worried, and she would never be held to account. The overwhelming relief that swept through you somehow pushed aside the anger. That would come later, with a feeling of dread of what might have happened that engulfed you, twisting your guts until you vomited. You undressed your daughter carefully, removed your shoes, and got into bed beside her, but you did not sleep that night. Your arm rested over her protectively all night. You didn't feel safe enough to sleep. The next morning, after Helen had gone to work, you packed your things and left. You changed your flight at the airport and arrived home early. You stopped answering the phone when Helen's name appeared on the screen. You stopped all communication with her. You did not trust yourself not to give in, not to forgive. Helen's awake now and watching you. Say something. Go on. Say you're sorry, you urged silently. You're giving her a chance to redeem herself. You will not force it out of her. But instead she says, "You know who came to see me the other day?" She names a well-known musician. You say nothing. You realize that there is nothing you can say and that you must leave. You get up and pick up your coat. You mouth the usual platitudes. You have to go. You will call to see how she's doing. Will you? A nurse arrives at that moment to say that the specialist is on his rounds and will be in soon. Helen is looking at the nurse in a childlike way, as though salvation is there, as though she's the only person in the world worth talking to. You put on your coat and make for the door. She looks at you and is about to say something. You hesitate. She says, "The specialist comes to see me every day." You walk away. It doesn't matter anymore. Time has run out for both of you.
Well done.